of data collection. It can be even where 100 people live, and then we have a field reporter who feed into the system, and the system goes all the way to the regional and continental, and we share with TAI at the continental level. So we have interventions which are more project-based at local level. Then at the middle range level, we have programmatic approach. Programmatic in such a way that it gives us a number of projects from that program. One program, for example, gender development, then we have so many other projects. And at the international level and national level, we have policies. So if you have policy, programs, and projects. So at the level of intervention, we can have an approach that is either vertical and horizontal, that affects everyone. If you have policies at the top, how vertically can you translate it into actions? That's why I keep talking about climate security actions. How do you translate policies into actions? How do you translate policies into programs and projects? So that is one. The other approach is, within the three levels, you have bottom-up and top-down approach, but also we introduce the inside-out approach. That means you locate yourself into programmatic area, and then you expand sideways so that you are able to reach, you are able to articulate, you are able to make changes. Now, having said that, not all projects, not all policies suit all these modules of approaches. You need to be very aware of the policies. You need to be very aware of the community, what we call do no harm. I remember, because we were working in South Sudan, we were developing this training manual of do no harm for the government of South Sudan. And one of the things that I did not share with you, actually I didn't find you, was that when I went to Jongole Bor area, and the Murle were fighting the lone were, that was in August, and then December there was another big attack, and I was sent there to look at some of the issues, and I asked two questions to each community separately, and I asked, one of the questions I asked was, what does peace mean to you? How do you define peace? An elder. And he said, my peace, all these Murles have to be killed, and none should exist, because one Murle will disturb the entire community again and again and again. And we have lived with this kind of people. We don't want to see the Murle in this community. They are just pain. We don't want. Their absence is our peace. Then I asked him, what is security for you? And he said, bring me more guns. That is my security. I need more bullets. I need actions. I need to protect the security of my women and my children, is the numbers of guns and the sophistication I have so that I can deal with these people. And I thought I was dreaming, because from my classroom of peace and security and all that, I've never had such a definition of peace, a definition of security. And the same question I posed was to the lone elder, exactly the same answer that I received. So our understanding of peace and security differs a lot. Our understanding and interpretation of approaches to finding solutions differ a lot. So if we begin to understand some of these small definitional issues of peace and security from the very local, and it still means insecurity for others, we still have a lot of work to do. So in all these areas, I have several points that I can elaborate to qualify some of these approaches that we have been working with from the local, middle range to top. For example, how do we recognize various norms that we have, policies from the AU, from the conventional policies, and translate them into actions at the local level? And what kind of approaches do we need? We are looking at resource-based conflicts today, the utilization, depletion, and all that. How do we design strategies that make us share these resources? Because they are actually diminishing. This morning I was hearing the representative who was talking about Lake Chad. Lake Chad is gone. It has affected communities who are farming. It has affected fishing. How do we share resources which are depleting? Peace processes are failing, and we don't know the modalities of implementing some of these peace agreements. in all the peace agreements that I've been studying, and we have participated in some of them in Juba, the LRA, I think you were there as well. And it's about power sharing. Go back to all these peace agreements. The results are all about power sharing. How much do I get? How many ministries will I be allocated? It's not about looking at the key issues of the society, women, children, post-conflict development, and sharing of natural resources, bringing economy back so that people can benefit. It's always about power sharing. And I can assure you on that. How do you control, for example, light weapons? Which is now, we talk about an approach that can broaden the civil space for populations. Now, as we speak, we have militarized politics, militarized ethnicity, monetized politics, monetized elections, and we are left with nothing else but to defend our own societies. We are left with nothing else but to carry guns. Can you imagine in some parts of Uganda when children are sitting for exams, at the door is a police officer with a military uniform, with a gun, protecting children from sitting exams. At the back of the room, there is another police officer who is standing there. You're supposed to sit for exams. And all our spaces are now militarized. You go to markets, there are guns. You go to schools, there are guns. You go to the roads, there are guns. You go to communities, there are guns. How do we demilitarize and make our civil space more democratic and peaceful? So those are things that also we have joint analysis. I have so many points that I could give to you, but I think for the purpose of time, I'll leave at that. And structurally, we need to look at structural approach. But I would also want to add something on systemic, because our peace and security structure is more looking at the systemic approach to conflict. We have embedded so many conflict issues one after the other. And if you're looking for root causes of resource-based conflict in the IGAD region today, you cannot just look at one issue. They're all so much systematically and structured in such a way that you need to disentangle all that is from the bottom, from the grassroots level, all the way up to government structures, police structures, military structures, and how it works out. So we should be looking at the systemic and the structural approaches to peace and security, and that translates also to climate security. Climate change is more systemic and structured in such a way that we should begin to look at the underlying issues systematically and structurally. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Did you want to add something on that before I open it up?
Just to be really, really brief, I'll continue with the theme and start with two confessions. Dr. Sunday, he looks very young, but he and I worked together 12 years ago in South Sudan, and we're still hearing the same conversations around climate change, around financing, around structuring. I used to have hair in those days, but I lost it. Dr. Sunday's kept his. The second confession is I feel at times when I hear Taye and Sunday talk, I feel a bit jealous. They're working for organizations that are much younger than the UN. IGAD developed in the 1980s with thinking that was there in the 70s. Meanwhile, I work for an organization that was created for a world that no longer exists. It's a little bit the sick man of multilateralism. The structures were set up to avoid a great power conflict, to avoid a nuclear war, which is not our largest threat. And it's been slow, sluggish, and very, very simplistic in its move to dealing with climate change. So I would say don't look to the UN for support. Well, not for support. Don't look to the UN for leadership on climate change. Look to the younger organizations that started looking at these issues like IGAD. Look to the member states that are at the forefront of this because they're the ones who will have to deal with it. The UN is very good at putting together these forums, but in terms of action, it's where we kind of lack ability to get people moving in the same direction. And I think it also goes through with connecting the local to the global there too. We're not best placed to do that. We depend on our member states, we depend on the RECs, and we hope that they have more vibrance in them than the sick man of multilateralism at this point in time.
On that note, I'm going to open it up for the audience. Does anyone have any questions, comments, something they'd like to share? Yes, sir. Over there.
Good afternoon. My name is Shadrach Agaki. I just want to start from right where you've left, Daktari. We are not going to expect leadership from above. So that means we are going to start from below. So my question is to all of us, but I will get the answers and their views from them. How do we get the conversation moving from below going up? I mean, how do we talk about, in Kenya we have what we call public participation. But then we keep on asking ourselves about meaningful public participation. The people who are in South Sudan, who are experiencing floods, sometimes these people are not aware that this is climate change. So how do we start helping these people from below to start pushing policy makers? I want to give an example. I work for a legislator in Kenya. And one thing I've realized that so long as an issue becomes a public issue, then you have people acting. But if it is, we are quiet and nobody is talking about it, things is just run as usual. So as we sit in this conference, we go out after listening to all the analysis and the views that have been given. The question is, how do we start pushing this information to the people so that the people start demanding it? I think this will go to you, but it's a challenge also to all of us to start looking at the narrative that is running around and how do we shape that narrative such that it becomes something that people who are below understands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a comment over here.
Hi, my name is Susanna Humer from the World Food Programme. I have a question for both Dr. Kwesi and Dr. Sunday. Considering that you've both worked with the communities in terms of mediation, and Dr. Sunday, I thought your story of what someone's definition was of peace and what his definition of security was really interesting, because what we see in terms of communication, and this plays on the same comment or question that my colleague had just now, is on the communication part of climate change, particularly in speaking to those communities about climate change. I understand from reading an article that in Swahili there's not even a word for carbon. So how do you make these kinds of concepts, like how do we link peace and security to climate change, for example, particularly in those communities? How do we make that tangible for them? I know it's already tangible, but how do we incorporate that in how we speak to communities as well? Thanks.
Thank you so much. We'll just take one more question and then we can let the panelists respond to all the comments. Was there another one over there, please?
Thank you. So I think it's to Dr. Kwesi really about I didn't hear much of a mention of ecosystems, and I think one of the things I struggle with is that we talk about climate smart and climate work, but we don't talk about soil and soil have the ecosystems. And so one of the big things I find is that we